the Midnight Arcana. Hawthorne Prep was 90% aesthetic and 10% actual education. With its towering limestone spires and ivy that clung to the walls like skeletal fingers, it was the perfect stage for drama. At the center of this stage was the Hawthorne Tarot Club. Margot, the leader, wore her heavy gold rings like armor. To her, the cards were just props for games and chic mystery. She didn't believe in magic. Magic was something found in the brittle pages of the school's oldest books, not in real life. The club was a curated collection of contradictions. Margot was the iron-willed director, but her most loyal members were just as complex. Jude was the school's star athlete, a boy of broad shoulders and quiet size who secretly filled his locker with books of romantic poetry. He played the role of the skeptic, leaning back in his chair with a smirk, but his eyes always lingered a second too long on the cards Margot dealt. During the annual Senior Sleepover, while the rest of the class stayed in the gym, the group slipped away. Ezra, the group's reckless rebel, and Maeve, the quiet scholar, led the way down into the dark. They were heading for the 1898 archives, a subterranean vault that held the dusty, forbidden history of the school's founding families. The air in the corridor was cold and smelled of damp stone and long-buried secrets. Deep in the archives, they reached the headmaster's private alcove. Ezra knelt before a heavy oak cabinet carved with intricate, twisting serpents. He pulled a silver hairpin from his pocket, his fingers steady despite the chill. Margot watched over his shoulder, her breath hitching as the metal clicked within the lock. The cabinet seemed to groan, a low, wooden sound that echoed through the empty vaults. The door swung open to reveal a single object wrapped in tattered, blood-red silk. Margot reached in, pushing Ezra aside to claim the prize. As she unwrapped the bundle, a deck of ancient tarot cards was revealed. They were thick as wood, with gilded edges that had tarnished to a dark metallic bronze. Maeve stepped closer, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and academic curiosity as the silk fell away. They sat in a tight circle on the stone floor, the shadows of the archives pressing in from all sides. Margot began to shuffle the deck, the cards making a heavy, scraping sound like bone on stone. She placed 4 thick wax candles around them, lighting each one with a steady hand. The atmosphere in the room turned heavy, as if the air itself were gaining weight, pressing down on their chests. Margot drew the first card and flipped it over, the Fool. But this was no standard deck. The illustration showed a youth in a Hawthorne Prep blazer walking blindly off a jagged cliff into a dark, swirling vortex. Jude leaned forward, his face pale in the flickering light. Ezra let out a nervous whistle, but the sound was swallowed by the silence of the room. Suddenly, the temperature in the vault plummeted. Jude exhaled, watching his breath form a thick white mist in the freezing air. The candle flames, which had been dancing naturally, suddenly froze in place and stretched upward. They shifted from warm amber to a brilliant, ghostly emerald green. Maeve gasped, clutching the silver locket around her neck until her knuckles turned white. Margot felt an icy pull in her fingertips as her hand moved of its own accord. She drew the second card, the Tower. It depicted a perfect replica of the school's library tower, splitting apart under a bolt of golden lightning. As the card touched the floor, a low rumble vibrated through the stone beneath them. Ezra looked up in alarm as dust drifted down from the ceiling like gray snow. The third card was Death. As Margot laid it down, the shadows on the walls began to detach from the stone. They didn't move like light, they flowed like liquid, pooling on the floor and rising up into tall, shapeless pillars. Maeve backed away, her heels clicking against the floor, while Ezra stood his ground, though his hands were shaking. The archives felt alive, and the darkness was hungry. From the coalescing shadows, a terrifying entity emerged. It was woven from midnight smoke and glittering gold dust towering over the circle. It had no face, only two hollow sockets where eyes should be, glowing like freshly minted gold coins. Margot looked up at the figure, her leadership forgotten, replaced by a raw, primal awe. The entity did not speak, yet its presence vibrated in their very marrow. "You have unsealed the arcana," a voice echoed directly into their minds, cold and resonant. "The debt must be paid in the currency of this deck. For every card drawn, a truth must be surrendered. A debt of truth for a debt of blood." The entity leaned over Jude, its golden eyes burning with an intense, judging light. The athlete felt the weight of his own heart, heavy with the things he had never said. Jude collapsed to his knees, his bravado shattered like glass. "I didn't lose my academic notebook," he confessed, his voice breaking in the hollow room. "I burned it in the woods behind the gym. The pressure to be the best student and the best athlete. I couldn't breathe. I wanted an excuse to fail so everyone would stop expecting so much." As he spoke, a spectral image of a notebook engulfed in gold flames appeared beside the entity. The entity turned its faceless gaze toward Maeve. She began to weep, the sound small and sharp in the vast archive. "The scholarship to Oxford. I stole it," she whispered, the words tumbling out as if they had been poisoned. "I forged the headmaster's signature to put my name on the list instead of yours, Margot. We were so poor, and I was so scared of staying here forever. I'm sorry." Margot recoiled as if she had been struck. The air between her and Maeve seemed to thicken with the weight of the betrayal. Margot had spent the last year thinking she had simply been overlooked, never imagining her best friend would be the one to pull the ladder out from under her. A wall of dark, pulsing smoke rose between the two girls, shimmering with a sickly green light that mirrored Margot's heartbreak. Ezra stepped forward next, holding out a silver pocket watch he had taken from the school museum weeks ago. "I took this," he said, his voice flat but honest. "Not because I wanted it. I just wanted to see if anyone would notice it was gone. I wanted to see if anyone would care enough to look for me." The entity reached out, and the watch dissolved into gold dust, merging with the entity's shifting form. Finally, Margot reached for the final card, the star. As she turned it over, it depicted a girl weeping alone in a field of glass. The entity loomed over her, its golden eyes wider and brighter than before. The air was silent, waiting for the final payment. Margot's fingers brushed the card, and she felt the absolute cold of the truth she had been hiding even from herself. "I created this club because I was terrified of being invisible," Margot sobbed, her pride finally stripped away to the bone. "I don't care about the cards. I just wanted people to look at me. I just wanted friends who wouldn't leave me behind." Jude reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder as she spoke. For the first time, the leader of Hawthorne Prep looked like the teenager she actually was. As the final truth was spoken, the entity fractured. It didn't explode. It simply dissolved into 1,000 glittering particles of gold dust that swirled through the air like a localized galaxy. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere cleared instantly. The emerald flames of the candles snapped back to warm yellow and then flickered out, leaving the four of them in the natural, quiet dark of the early morning. They walked out of the heavy archive doors and through the school gates just as the sun began to crest over the horizon. The sky was awash of brilliant pink and gold, mirroring the dust they had left behind. They were messy, hurt, and their friendships were fractured. But as they walked into the light, they were more honest with each other than they had ever been. The real magic had finally begun.